What if I told you that you could be the next Sir David Attenborough or Jacques Cousteau? Imagine that. What most of us were inspired by, the two people that probably, and Dr. Sylvia Earle as well, the people that we've been inspired by are heroes of ours, celebrities, if you will. And we would never have expected that we could become that. But I'm going to tell you today that you could become that with today's technology and social media. You can be the next Dr. Sylvia Earle. You could be the next, Jacques Cousteau or Sir David Attenborough. You just have to publish. You just have to publish. Not papers. I mean, you could do that, but not necessarily papers. You just have to have a passion and publish on social media. We're going to talk about why that's so important in today's world and why you can do that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is a podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. As I was just, saying that for the, I don't know how many time, 100th time, maybe 200th time, I say that every episode, 3 days a week. And I remember changing my cadence for that, or changing the beginning of this episode to that, because I wanted to change it up a little bit. And I remember how difficult it was when I first did it, because I was so used to talking about Speak Up for Blue. I was so used to talking about what I wanted, what people were going to get out of this. And when you change sort of your priorities, or you change the way you are presenting a podcast or any kind of internet program or anything that can be done digitally, it takes a while to get used to the change. It takes me back to when I first started. What was I going to say? What was I going to talk about? Who was I going to talk to? All these different types of things. How long am I going to go on for? I mean, we're 1,544 episodes into this podcast. A lot of changes have happened, but I never expected to get this far. And now I don't even expect to finish. Like, I don't know when I will stop, if I will stop. It's something that I've always enjoyed doing, and it's something that I continue to enjoy doing. And I guess I would stop when the enjoyment really stops. But, my whole point of this is that it takes a while to get used to doing this type of thing. But I've done it. And it's worked out really well for me. Not only from a personal standpoint of staying in connection with ocean conservation and marine biology and marine science, it's also helped me introduce myself to a lot of different people from a lot of different places, professors and scientists and people who work for nonprofit organizations, some celebrities within our own, field, talking about projects, talking about sort of, the inner workings of some of the challenges working in marine biology, talking about ocean justice, stuff that I never thought I'd be talking about. And I got to talk about that. So from a personal standpoint, it's always great. And then from a professional standpoint, it's great because I was able to affect, and I continue to be able to affect people's lives. When it comes down to how they think about the ocean, or how they, pursue a career in marine science and conservation. These have been the great things that I've been able to do. And to be honest, in my own right, I've become a bit of a Sir David Attenborough, a Jacques Cousteau. I've inspired people. Not on a program that is, worth millions of dollars every time you put out a show, or it's just a season of like 10 episodes, or maybe it's a documentary. I haven't had that chance. I've been part of a documentary before, but I haven't had that chance where I have my own show and I do all that kind of stuff, because that's just not the way I roll. I sit in my office, I read articles, I talk to people, and I get as many stories out as possible so that you can make the decisions. I don't just wait for, and this is just my personal preference, some people have production companies and make high-quality documentaries, whether they be in an hour episode on a TV network, or they're, doing a podcast, that gets a lot of views, or on YouTube, or they're doing a show of some sort, right? That's their way of doing it. That's them becoming their own Jacques Cousteau, their own version of Sir David Attenborough, and they're doing a fantastic job at that. Some people don't use podcasting. They'll use TikTok, or they'll use Instagram, or they'll use YouTube to be able to basically, look at how they are presenting their work, presenting their creativity, and presenting their own way of connecting the people to the ocean. And it's a great way of doing it. And, I was listening to a video on YouTube the other day, and listening because I was in the car. So I'm not watching, I'm listening. The beauty of having YouTube Premium, which I'm not sponsored by YouTube by any means. But I do use YouTube Premium quite a bit because I like to listen to people talk. And so the beauty of that is I can put on a video, lock my screen, just throw it in the car, and I can listen to people talk. And there's this guy that I've been listening to for a long time. He's kind of like my motivator. His name's Gary Vaynerchuk. I've talked about him a number of times on the podcast. He is a social media guru. He's written the books Crush It and Crushing It, as well as a number of other books that are in and around, social media marketing, and has a multi-million-dollar company for social media marketing, working with brands like Coke and IBM and all these huge brands. But he did something a long time ago where he decided to just film everything he does, right? He started off with humble beginnings. His dad was owned a liquor store, a wine store, and he started a YouTube channel in 2006 when YouTube started, called Wine Library with Gary Vaynerchuk or something like that. And it's called Wine Library. And he would taste wines and talk about wines all the time. And basically took a store that was in New Jersey, I believe, and put it online and started selling wine, to customers in different states. And he talks about that process all the time. And I'm not going to go into it because that's not the point of this show. The point of this show is that Gary Vaynerchuk has done it, has talked about doing it, and continues to talk about doing it. And a couple of years ago, he decided to film himself talking about what he's done, what he's accomplished, and the motivation that comes out of this guy's mouth. Now, he does have a bit of a potty mouth, but the motivation that comes out of his mouth gets me going. And so I listen to him on a fairly regular basis, 3 to 4 times a week. And I may not listen to all of his episodes or his shows. He's on a podcast, he's on YouTube, he's on all the social media platforms. He's got a team that does it for him, which is great. And he even admits it. It's a team that does it for him. And he made that investment a long time ago, which shot him through the roof in terms of not only getting business, but popularity within the space. And he offers advice and all this kind of stuff to everybody, celebrities, as well as people who are just your regular, what we call average Joe and Janes, right? Or whoever, And so what he does is essentially motivates people. And I was listening to an episode on his YouTube channel recently, this past week, and one of the things that he said really stood out to me. And he's like, there used to be gatekeeping in influencers, right? Like from the past, like growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was all TV. You had your celebrities that were on TV. For us, it was the Cousteaus, not just Jacques Cousteau, but all of his sons and his grandsons and his granddaughters have all made names for themselves within the marine conservation space. And then we also have Sir David Attenborough. We have Dr. Sylvia Earle. We have a lot of people who have been in and around, TV for quite a long time, who have these organizations that look huge, and they're traveling all over the world, and they're doing these documentaries. And when they talk, people listen. And they do these speaking engagements, and which is fine, which is great. But now with social media, there's not as much gatekeeping, and it really comes down to people can really change their lives in the way that they're working for the better within marine biology and conservation, so that they can actually have a career not only in science communication but doing their work and filming it. I just did an interview on both How to Protect the Ocean, which was earlier this year in the summer, as well as on Beyond Jaws, which we just published in our last episode, the latest episode, with Jalen Myers, who's doing her PhD out at James Cook University in Australia. And she is a perfect example of someone who decided to film their work to show people what they do. She works on stingrays, and she's looking at distribution of stingrays within Australian waters in a specific part, and she's looking at feeding and all this kind of stuff. She uses drones. It's a pretty exciting, and she's in sort of the coastal wilderness of Australia. And so she'll have people who are working with her. She'll say, "Hey, look, we just caught this this stingray, and we're gonna look at what its gut content. So we're gonna film this. Let's film this, and I'll talk through it and what they're eating and all that kind of stuff." And it makes for compelling information, right? It makes for compelling watching on TikTok or Instagram, where she mostly publishes. And, when I watch this, I'm just like, wow, this is really cool. She's just doing this, and it takes a lot of work to do this, but she's just doing it and then posting it. She might do a little bit of work and editing when she goes back to the lab, but while she's in her field, she's thinking about it all the time. And she presents different things that happen to her in the field. And so people who want to be marine biologists, people who have always wanted to be marine biologists, can follow this and say, wow, this is really interesting. Here's Jalen, young woman from Indiana, I believe, in the US, all the way over in Australia, doing work on PhD. And she's showing everything that she's done. And she's talking through it really, really well. And, she continues to do this to this day. And it's just wonderful to see. Because it's great, because she becomes that person. Like, she may not be on, Shark Week one day. She may not, I don't know. But she may not hit TV status at one point, or at this point anyway. But she's definitely hitting some status on social media that people watch. And I watch, my daughters, when they come home from school, and this is always a battle. I guess it was the battle like my parents had when I came home from school and I would watch TV because there was no internet. But when my kids come home, they're on their phones and they're watching social media, whether it be TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat. They're watching these channels. This is their entertainment. It's not, they won't sit in front of the TV and they won't watch that. They won't even watch YouTube as much. It's more of like short content, which has its own problems, let's be honest. It worries me as a parent a little bit, but this is what they watch, and their friends watch it too. And I'm sure they're not the only young people who watch this. They're not the only teenagers who watch this. So as people are trying to, be inspired, and they're watching these different channels, not channels on a TV cable state network, but watching it on internet channels, this is your time to shine. This is, you become their Jacques Cousteau, their Sylvia Earle, their Sir David Attenborough. A number of years ago, I remember hearing there were tryouts to become the next Sir David Attenborough for BBC. David Attenborough is getting up there in age. He's in his 90s, well into his 90s. Still an amazing person and still doing documentaries. But BBC was like, hey, do you want to be the next Sir David Attenborough? We need someone else to do this type of work. So people would put in their audition tapes and everything like that. But they had the ability to do it right then and there. I see accounts on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube all the time that have become very popular for a subsection of an audience, which in some cases could be hundreds of thousands of people, even millions of people, even 10,000 people. And they continue to post consistently, talking about different things, and all of a sudden, they become sort of the influencer. They become that audience's Sir David Attenborough. That audience is Dr. Sylvia Earle. That audience is Dr. Asha DeVos. Because they're on social media and they're showing their life and they're sharing their ideas just like anybody else could. But they're doing it consistently. They're doing it and they're getting the attention of people who are actually looking for a specific topic, and they find it entertaining. And that's what it is about today. It's about gaining attention. It's always been about gaining attention. In the 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, the attention was getting it on TV. That's how you got people's attention, because everybody was watching TV. Nowadays, it's how do you gain attention when everybody else is trying to gain attention? There's so many more millions of people trying to get attention on a digital platform of your choosing. And it's really just, there's an audience for that. I've talked about this before. When iPhones came out and they had all these apps, the big thing about the advertising was like, there's an app for that. You want to learn to play the banjo? There's an app for it. Then podcasting came in and they're like, hey, there's a podcast for that. You want to learn to play the banjo? You can learn it on a podcast of how to play the banjo. You want to protect the ocean? Go look up How to Protect the Ocean podcast and it'll tell you how to I'll tell you how to protect the ocean. But it's not just me. It's not just, you. It's everybody. There are people that I watch on TikTok each and every day that do amazing work. Some are always outdoors and have compelling footage of underwater filming and things like that. Some are on, a shark guide tour guide. right? Where they bring people out, they dive with sharks, and they show that every day on TikTok. And it's compelling information. I live in Ontario. I sit in my office. I've been called an armchair conservationist. Yes, and I very might be at this point. My job, what I've taken on, is to inspire everybody by telling stories and having them tell their stories on the podcast or on a video, right? Or on social media. That's the what I've been trying to do. And I work with what I have. I don't have an ocean beside me. I have Great Lakes. I don't go in the Great Lakes that often. I don't use it as much as I could. It's just not my personality. But I sit here in my spare time and I scour the internet and I connect with people on different social media sites and I ask them to be on my podcast so I can talk to them about their story, to share with my audience, to inspire my audience to say, hey, this is how we protect the ocean. This is how you can do it. And it works. It's been working. Am I getting the huge fame? No, I don't want that. I want to inspire you who's listening to this saying, what can I do? How can I, protect the ocean? And I think that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to how we can really do this. How can we really inspire people and then doing it? It's just execution. That's the only difference from idea to execution. I had this idea of doing a podcast, back in 2014. Took me a year to record some episodes, to get the guts to do it. And then once I started publishing, I fell in love with it. Not because I got a lot of feedback within the first year, just because I enjoyed doing it. And now I've taken it to a point where I've gotten some notoriety on it. I've gotten recognition off of it, in terms of the work that I do. And that's perfect for me. It's exactly what I want to do. I want people to use this information to be able to change their behavior or their lives around protecting the ocean. That's the goal. That's what I like to do. And in the process, I become someone's Sir David Attenborough. I become someone's Dr. Sylvia Earle, someone's Jacques Cousteau. Not to that notoriety, not to toot my own horn, but that's what I become. And you could become that too to someone. To many people. You just have to do it. It's amazing how we can do it. And over the next year, one of my goals is to take every Wednesday on this communications part, the Speak Up for Blue part, and explain how you can approach, actually publishing this stuff, actually, putting a workflow into place. Because that's what it comes down to. There's when we look at publishing, there's this beauty of, hey, I've been doing this for, 9-10 years and I've been able to, hit notoriety. I've been able to be recognized in public and people talk to me about the podcast and all this kind of stuff. And that's great. But for the first 5 years, I was just a grind. And it was trying to figure out how can I do, at one point I was publishing 7 days a week. How can I do that? And I just thought about that the other day. I'm like, if I were to do that again, would I be able to do that while I'm working a daytime job? How much time would that take up compared to what I'm doing, what else I'm doing, right? It's about workflow. It's about efficiency. It's about when you can work on the podcast, how you do the podcast, how many times you put out the podcast, and what is your purpose, right? Is it always coming back to why am I doing this? What is my why? I always hear that. What is my why? Why am I doing this? And then that inspires you and motivates you to keep going through and executing. And a lot of people have trouble getting to that execution part, right? They like to think about it and like to talk about it with friends. And then eventually they're going to be like, your friends are going to be like, are you ever going to start this? Because you've been talking about it a long time. How do you get started? And that's the fear breaks in. And it's also just the work. It takes a lot of work, whether you're doing a podcast, video, TikTok, Instagram, it takes a lot of work. You need to be inspired yourself to do it. So over the next year, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that, to get you started. That's the whole point for my next year is to help get you started. Help get you started publishing. Help get you started doing the work and putting those steps into place to be able to say, this is what I need to do. That's the goal. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be trying to get you to move forward, and we're going to try and get you to publish more on social media, because I think that's going to be really important. We need to get more people out there so that you can become not only the David Attenboroughs or the Sylvia Earles. It's more of, let's get people inspired to protect the ocean in your own way, the way you want to do it, not the way I do it, the way you want to do it. Because I always catch myself doing this. I look at Gary Vee and I'm like, I should be doing what he's doing. I should publish all the time. I should get someone to film me wherever I go. I can't afford a team to do that. I would love to do that. I don't want someone following me wherever I go. Right? I don't want to do that. That's not me. Me is doing this podcast. Me is trying to figure out, like, anything I add on, I have to, like, really look at myself and be like, what is this going to bring to the overall sort of message that I'm bringing, in terms of my communication style? Is it me? I don't want to look at somebody else and be like, I can do that, so I'm going to just copy that. No. What can I bring to somebody? That's what people look at. They look at that authenticity, right? Come forward with your authenticity. It's you. They want to hear from you. They don't want to hear from somebody online, because if they did, they would listen to that and that person would be talking about it, but they're not. That's not their choice. They choose to talk about whatever they want. But when you're trying to talk about the ocean, do it from a place where it's you, not from somebody else's voice, from your voice. And I think that's really important to think about. So there's a number of things to get out of this, right? Is to understand that you can inspire people, just like Jacques Cousteau did, just like Sylvia Earle continues to do, just like Sir David Attenborough continues to do. You can inspire people, right? The second thing, you have to figure out how you're going to bring your voice to the people, right? What are you going to use? What platform are you going to use? How are you going to speak? What message are you trying to bring? And how are you going to do it? What's your style? That's authentic to you. And the third thing is to find out how to do that. What is your workflow? How can you work within the constraints of your lifestyle that can help you publish this? And then learning how to do it. That's the last thing, the fourth thing. Just learning how to do it. That's what's important. All right, I think that's something that you should take from this episode. Those 4 steps is to really think about it. But it really starts with, how do you become the next Jacques Cousteau? How do you become the next Sylvia Earle? How do you become the next David Attenborough? I'm going to leave you with that. If you have any questions or comments, you would need some help, feel free to contact me. DM me on Instagram at howtoprotecttheocean. Okay. You can also go to conservation-careers.com and you can sign up for the Communication Careers course, Communications for Conservation course. And that is a course that I'm actually in right now. I'm taking. And it teaches you how to become a communications person for a conservation organization. So if you want to get into communications as a job, you can do that. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure this out. And I'd love to see you in there. It's a great app. And you can watch the videos on your phone. There's a great community in there. It's a really all-encompassing thing. Without having to spend all the money to go back to school, this will actually help you get a job. Right? It's done already. They've done it already with people. They have testimonials. And right now, if you go to conservation-careers, .com, you can go in, you sign up for one of the courses, the communications course, or any of the courses that they offer. You put in SUFB at checkout. So Speak Up for Blue, SUFB at checkout, and you get 33% off right off the bat. It's a great Christmas present to yourself, or if you want to ask your family to give that to you, it's a great Christmas present. Okay, 33% off. Just put in SUFB at checkout. And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Next episode, we're going to have an interview with Oceana Canada talking about the fisheries audit that they just released on November 21st on National Fisheries Day, or International Fisheries Day, I think. It's going to be really important. We're going to talk about what the state of fishery stocks in Canada are about. And that's kind of have to, you kind of extrapolate that to the world, where we're at, and how management can really help. And it's not. And it's just a matter of implementation. So we're going to talk about that next episode. I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.